Hello, She Lovelies. Welcome to this edition of Sisters in Mental Illness. I am so excited because, as you can see, I have a panel and it's more of us to talk about one of my favorite things to talk about. If you don't know me already, my name is Shaley Hoogendoorn. I host this Sisters in Mental Illness on She Loves once a month. And the reason that I do this is because I'm very passionate about mental health because I live with bipolar 2 disorder. And I know that when I was diagnosed, I was desperate to see another face of someone in it and alive and flourishing. And so I just want to tell as many stories as I can. This episode is going to be a little bit different because we're going to be doing more of a topic than just asking someone to tell their story. And we wanted to talk about a few things about self-care and taking care of ourselves, which is the same thing, and self-compassion, and just in response to what we're going through right now. I know we're feeling collective grief and anxiety, and I just would love this to be a conversation that you could listen to and take away some things to keep your mind healthy. So I would love to have my friends introduce themselves. So could we start with my friend Claire?
Hello, everybody. My name is Claire DeBoer. I used to write for She Loves magazine, but life became very busy when I started doing my master's degree in counseling, and unfortunately I had to leave that behind. But I'm now getting to the point where I'm almost graduated. I'm working with a lot of people in mental health, and I'm super excited about the way forward and to be here today. And yes, mental health is definitely a topic that is very close to my heart due to my work, and also for personal reasons because I have long suffered with depression.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
I know, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you guys said yes. And then Abby, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Abby Norman. I write for She Loves as well. And I, let's see, it's been a year now since I graduated with my master's degree. I'm on the ordination track at the United Methodist Church, a master's in divinity. And I am a pastor at a small and beautiful church in Southeast Atlanta. And very often you can find me on Twitter using the hashtag Pastor on Prozac, because I was probably clinically, I probably should have been on antidepressants in high school for sure after I had my first daughter, but only started when I moved into my master's degree from teaching. And it was like I had taught myself how to be depressed while teaching, but I hadn't taught myself how to be depressed while being in my master's program. So I got on Prozac, and it's like every day it's a gift from God.
Amen. Love it. I love it. And then finally, I would love for my friend Jena to share a little bit about herself.
Thank you. I'm Jena Friedrich. I live in Surrey, BC, and have gotten to know Shaley and Claire through life group. Just total random, ended up meeting Edalette and a few people, and could kind of tell that they knew each other, and I was like, what's going on here? Can I get in on this goodness? And so got to be kind of welcomed into this beautiful group of women, and love the honesty, love the friendship. And I have struggled with depression and obsessive compulsive disorder since I was a teenager. And I look back on my life now and I'm like, wow, I did need a lot of help and support. I feel bad for my parents, not knowing how to help, and was able to manage quite fine until I had my children. And when I had my son and I had my daughter really close together, and that was when it was like everything was fine as long as I could keep control. And then as soon as the world, children, other people, no control. And so then I really struggled with postpartum, and obsessive compulsive disorder really got bad. So it was after I had my daughter, I knew I needed help. I was going to yoga classes in the community, and it was helpful and it was great, but really missing the spiritual piece, missing the ability to open my heart and really be present and really feel filled. So through the practice of yoga and being able to link it with my faith and find a fullness there, I've been able to work through a lot of anxiety. But meeting women who are honest and true to who they are and really vulnerable has just inspired me to be the same. And so it's really interesting how I always think, what do I really value most in other people? And it's when they're true and real, and when they're really authentic and vulnerable. And so that is why I'm here today, is to just be real, to be vulnerable, and like Shaley said, just to help to shed some light for people. Yeah, bring some truth, bring some goodness, bring some grace into the conversation.
Well, thank you for showing up, friend. One of the things that I felt was really important when we did this is we talk a lot about doing the things, but I really wanted to do them together here and give our listeners just an opportunity to do some of the things that are helpful with us. So before we get started, I would just love, Jena, if you could just walk us through a grounding exercise. I would just so appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things that's really powerful, and I mean, the science is really coming out about the power of the breath. But yeah, just being able to take some moments just to breathe intentionally and breathe deeply can have such a profound effect. The body, we can go into fight or flight, even just thinking a thought, having an experience, a trigger, something happens and our bodies don't know the difference, and so can go into fight or flight. And the ability to, in those moments, breathe deeply and meaningful, intentionally, has the ability to actually flip the switch and cause our bodies to go into a state of calm. And so yeah, let's just do some deep breathing. I just encourage you to sit, whether you're in a chair or cross-legged on your bed or on the floor, wherever. Just find a comfortable seated position. Let your legs just fall and be relaxed. Envision a line of energy from your tailbone out the crown of your head. I like to imagine a plumb line, almost like a puppet on a string, and being able to just kind of lift your crown out of that grounding position, out of your tailbone. Maybe just allow your eyes to shut, and for your hands to be heavy. Maybe your palms are down or your palms are up. The shoulders can roll down and back away from your ears. Your ears are over your shoulders, and maybe the chin just tucks a little bit. You take a moment to unclench the jaw. And just begin to breathe here, envisioning the crown of your head lifted, energetically lifting up and out. And just begin to breathe, starting in the low belly, allowing the low belly to just expand open as you fill the torso with breath. Inhaling as you're filling, like a pitcher with water, filling. And exhaling, imagining that pitcher of water emptying slowly. Inhaling into the low belly, filling, letting the air rise, and exhaling, letting the air travel out all the way down until your pitcher is empty. Inhaling, filling the fullness of breath, and exhaling, emptying from the top and down. Continue to breathe like that for a few more full breaths. Imagining your being filled with every breath to a fullness, to capacity, and with every exhale, a releasing, a letting go, an ungripping. Inhaling into the low belly and exhaling all the way down. You might start to feel a sensation in your lower abdomen, maybe in your chest. Just notice coming back to the breath. Inhale and exhale. At the end of the breath, on the inhale and on the exhale, you might have a sensation, maybe a bit of a feeling like a gripping. And that's okay, just notice. And as the air is exchanged with every inhale and every exhale, envision, imagine a letting go, a releasing. Continuing to breathe. A couple more full breaths here, in and out. The exchange of the new for the old, of the fresh for the used. One more full, nice, deep breath here. And your last exhale, just envision yourself, imagine yourself, your heart space releasing. And gently, maybe bring your awareness back to your fingers and your toes, and you give them a little bit of a wiggle, and just shrug your shoulders again, down your back. Allow your jaw to loosen. It may have tightened up again. That's okay. Just allow it to loosen. Maybe sway side to side, picturing that energy, picturing that line of energy. Taking one nice final inhale here. And on the exhale, just open your mouth and just soft sigh, let it all out. And open your eyes. Continue to breathe naturally. The beautiful thing about the breath is that it just keeps going. Whether we're aware of it or not, it's just this continual passive thing that we can engage with, and it just keeps going when we stop engaging with it. It's really beautiful.
Thank you, friend.
Yeah.
Also, I could listen to your voice all day.
Oh.
So calming. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for that. Awesome. Oh, I love the jaw, relaxing the jaw, because we know we're going to be using it a lot now as we go into our conversation. So that was really nice for me, because sometimes before things, I'm like, I didn't realize that my jaw was tight. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I would love to start our conversation with Claire. And Claire, I would just love for you to give us a starting point from where we're talking from, just talking about the stress, anxiety. What is anxiety compared to an anxiety disorder? Could you give us a little, what your definition would be?
Well, that's a big topic,
Mhm.
quite complex, but I will definitely share my perspective. So I see stress as a response to an event or a set of events. So if we are trying to juggle 10 different things in life at once, like being a mom, working, for me right now, also writing a thesis, when you have a lot on your plate, it will take its toll on you spiritually, mentally, and in your body. And it can feel a lot like anxiety. Jena was talking before about the fight flight response. They can feel very similar. But with anxiety and anxiety disorders, they tend to be more of an ongoing thing that people need to learn to manage. And Jena, I'm sure you can speak to that. It's similar to depression, right? It's not something that goes away. We learn to manage it. And anxiety can show up in a ton of different ways. I'm sure many people have heard of generalized anxiety disorder, and that's that feeling that fight or flight response, which may be, it may feel like a tightness in the chest, shortness of breath, sweatiness, just like a constant not feeling like you can calm yourself. And then for some people that might be in response to something specific, like we have anxiety around social situations, or we have anxiety around going outside. And so these are sort of more prolonged disorders that we have to learn how to manage, whereas stress I see more as a response to a specific event where we're overloaded and we're not taking care of our needs in those situations. Does that kind of make sense? It's a very quick sort of explanation there. It's definitely more complex, but that's
Well, I love the way you broke it down a bit, just because I know I'm very passionate about language when we're talking about mental health, because we've taken a lot of words and kind of normalized them. So then we don't really have words for the actual disorders anymore because we use them interchangeably. So I really like that you pulled apart the difference between stress, and then you can have anxiety, then you can also have an anxiety disorder. I love that. Well, I don't love the disorders. I love that you explained it. And I loved, when I think about the prolonged thing, and also how sometimes I explain my anxiety is that my body reacts like a bear is chasing me, which is supposed to do that when a bear is chasing me, but not when I'm in the grocery store trying to figure out a decision about whether or not to buy no name or not no name, right? Exactly. So that's how a little bit about how I like to describe it. And I thought that it was really important to talk about those things, just because in response to what we're going through right now with the COVID and the pandemic, and I know people that don't usually experience as much stress or anxiety are, and maybe haven't had to do some of the things that we're suggesting today before. So I was wondering, could you just tell us a little bit about, what you're noticing in your circles and in your work? What kind of responses are you noticing? Are they all different? Are you noticing very similar ones? I'm curious about that.
Well, definitely a huge variety for sure, because for some people, they may have lost their work. And then for other people, they're going along as usual. Some people are actually directly affected. They know people who have the illness, or maybe they've experienced the illness themselves. So definitely seeing a variety of responses. The thing that has surprised me the most, especially in my clients, is those who tend to be the most anxious are not experiencing extra anxiety because of this. Like, I've even heard some people say to me, okay, well, now the rest of the world knows what it feels like to be anxious, right? So that has been interesting, because I sort of expected a lot of my clients to kind of be really reaching out a lot more and feeling their anxiety to a much greater degree. But I haven't particularly noticed that. Some people I've found are really grateful for the downtime, because they were just overloaded before, and now they're getting a bit more of a break. And then other people, there's a lot of fear around it. And I definitely caution people not to be too tuned into the media and to the news. Get your facts for sure. But when we are constantly feeding ourselves information about what's going on, it can really perpetuate that fear and send you into a place where you're just spiraling. Like there's a lot of thoughts right now about how things aren't going to get better until we have a vaccine. And that's a really hard way to think about it, because we don't know when a vaccine is going to be available, and we really just don't know what's going to happen. And so telling ourselves nothing's going to get better until we have a vaccine just is not helpful, and it just perpetuates that fear and those anxious feelings, right? So yeah, just a whole variety, from feeling much calmer to a lot of fear and anxious responses.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I know that I don't know if you other ladies related to that, but I completely related to or I've had conversations where like, you feel like this, like a lot of your life. And I'm like, yeah, right. Yeah. Abby, I would love to hear from your perspective for yourself and your community and faith community, what responses have you been noticing?
Yeah, first of all, you can see my emotional care puppy behind me. She keeps tapping her head in, so I just want to name that so that people aren't like, is that a dog? It is. It's a dog. She hangs out with me. But yeah, so there's a lot of spiritual narrative that needs to be unpacked around COVID-19, and also lived theology, right? So theology is just, what do we think about God, and how do we think about God, and how do we think about the ways that God works? And what I have discovered is that, right, I went to Candler School of Theology, I got my master's in divinity, so I'm supposed to have all the right answers. Yeah, right. But even if I think that I believe something about God, right, sometimes pandemics happen, and then you have all these feelings because you realize, like, God isn't operating the way I think God is supposed to operate. And so you're being confronted with your theology in like a very, very real way. Because it is hard right now to say things like, God is in control and God is good. Like, are we sure about that? Because it doesn't feel like that, right? And so that's one of the things. There's a thing called spiritual gaslighting that is definitely happening. So in some faith communities, you are not allowed to have bad feelings, because bad feelings mean that you don't trust God. And it is the spiritual and church equivalent of good vibes only. So it's like, yeah, it's like Jesus looking at you and being like, good vibes only. Okay, so Jesus does not say that. Jesus does not wear a t-shirt that says good vibes only. Like, I'm 100% sure that is not what his Instagram account says. Jesus wept with his friends. Jesus got mad. Jesus threw public tantrums, which I love. Jesus begged God to make it stop. And so many of us have heard the story that our depression, our anxiety, or like bad feelings mean that we don't trust God. And that is 100% not true. And I don't know whether it's like fittingly or ironically, but I'm working right now on a book about laments. So it's coming out a year from now. So I'm turning in my chapter edits right now. And a full third of the Psalms are lament, which is basically people telling God, like, this is not okay. I am not okay. You better do something about this, because you are God and you need to get it together. And so I don't know about you, but I didn't learn how to pray like that in Sunday school. And so we are finding that our spirituality that we've been given, if you grew up in a Christian church, is not helpful to the situation that we're in right now. And then that is on top of that is so scary, because we're having to like unpack, oh, the world doesn't operate the way I thought it did. Now it's like, oh my gosh, and like me and God don't operate the way I thought I did. And there are very, very few places that you can really unpack all that in a way where you don't get blamed or shamed.
It's true. It's so true. And I don't know, I think we're experiencing it everywhere and seeing it in the news and on Facebook and such, but I feel like you might be experiencing it a little bit different or seeing it a little bit different. It seems kind of extreme in the States a little more. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, so not only do I live in the United States, I also live in the state of Georgia, and even Donald Trump said that our governor is making bad choices. Like, honest to God, it is really scary, you know, and it is scary. And I think that also I don't know about y'all, but my faith, I was never equipped with a faith that could hold all of the I don't knows that I have. Why is this happening? I don't know. Why is, why doesn't God stop this? Man, I don't know. Why are these leaders in charge? I do not know. And so there isn't a way to engage with that in what I call like Sunday school answers. Yeah. But I've really just been leaning on the God who is with us. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I want to go to your church. I love the way you talk about it. And I think that I don't know about you guys, but I think that I do, and I've experienced lots of other people, like carrying the both and, right? Like we're saying the good vibes only, like carrying this is terrifying and awful and boring and all these other things. And we know that we still have a God that is good. How do we hold that? I find that, yeah, that's the both and is one of the biggest things that I'm learning. And I'm really excited about your book because I didn't even actually know, but I didn't grow up in the church, but I didn't know the word lament actually until I started hanging out with She Lovelies. And I'm like, yes, teach me more, right? I think, yeah, we've completely made it hard to ask the questions. Yeah, You're right about that. One thing I would like to get into right now, so we talk about in the context of the church and faith communities. I don't know about you guys, but I'd love to hear if you guys have come up against anything when it comes to self-care. I know that I'll start with you, Claire, because I know that we've talked before about this and how you kind of define it differently than self-care. And I would just love to tell our listeners that. And then maybe all of us could kind of just, talk about this idea of self-care and how some might say self-care is selfish. But Claire.
So there's self-care that society might define as doing all of those things for ourselves, like meditation and yoga and taking a hot bubble bath, maybe even having a glass of wine, whatever self-care looks like. And those things are all important. I call those things that we need to put in our mental wellness toolbox. But for me, self-care is more about the relationship that we have with self. And so I like to phrase it more as self-compassion, because I think self-care naturally comes when we have a good relationship with ourselves and we have that self-compassion. It's hard to actually implement self-care if you really don't like yourself very much, right? And so that relationship with self is probably the biggest struggle that I find with clients, counseling clients. People come in for all sorts of different things, but then when you get to the root with it, relationship with self always just seems to come up in some way as part of that. So I think a lot of us are being given an opportunity right now due to COVID to have more downtime and to experience what our relationship with self is. And for some people who aren't used to spending a lot of time with themselves, there might be quite a lot that's coming up for them, right? Especially the extroverts among us who are not used to having a lot of downtime. They're used to being highly productive and highly social. And so I think this is a good time to examine, what does relationship with self look like and how kind are you being to yourself? And so that might be looking at all of the shoulds that you may put on yourself, like I should be thinking in a certain way. I shouldn't be having this reaction to what is going on with COVID. So if you have a healthy relationship to self, you recognize that whatever you're feeling, it's okay and it's allowed. And we can't fall into these scripts that society has that tell us this is how you should be feeling. This is the attitude you should have. You chin up. You should be feeling positive, right? The language around positivity frustrates me a lot. And whilst it's great to really keep your thoughts in check, I think this idea that society has around, okay, well, we just have to keep a positive attitude. And if you don't have a positive attitude, there's something wrong with you. I think that can create a lot of guilt and shame. So this is a time where we have an opportunity to look at, what is my relationship with myself and how compassionate am I being with myself? What is the language I am using with myself? And so I prefer to think of it as self-compassion rather than self-care, because self-care comes out of self-compassion.
Yeah,
that's my take on it.
Oh, good. So good. Yeah, Jena, I would love to hear from you a little bit, because we know that you have experience and can lead us through beautiful breathing exercises. And I know that yoga is a very important part of your life. I would love to hear about, your yoga journey, and because I think it kind of brings together what Claire's saying about self-compassion, but also the outer self-care, like the things we're doing on the outside. And I'd just love for you to be able to talk about a little bit more how you connected that.
Sure. Yeah, the thing that I think drew me to this practice was I found a yoga group, a kind of a foundation, I guess, a place where they have linked, the yoga, the moves and the science and the practice of it with the spirituality of the Christian tradition. And so taking the Bible and using, God's word as a place to anchor in, and being able to kind of open your heart in that way, linking mind, body, and soul. I found when I first started practicing yoga, I would, open your heart or look deep within, and looking deep within for me was kind of a crazy place. With OCD, I would have thoughts just going. And I almost needed a place to work it out physically, mentally, and spiritually, kind of work these thoughts out. I joke that, like running, I go for a run and come home just wound up tighter than, it just so, just like wound up is the best way I can describe it. And so with yoga, it's kind of been the idea of a practice. So the idea that it is not, there isn't an end. It's just something that you do. It's, rhythmic, but also a working out, a beginning and an end. I find, some days it looks different. but yeah, I've the linking with the breath, the mindfulness piece, the spiritual piece, and then the physical piece has been really, really helpful. I appreciate what you guys are saying about positivity. I think, especially, I mean, in the yoga world, we can get really hung up on that, love and light or whatever. But for me, I really have to acknowledge my negative feelings. And I feel like when we can make space for that in our life, we can almost allow, because we have feelings, and to deny them is to also deny the power that they might hold and the lesson that they want to teach us. Pain is hard, difficult things, it's hard, but it's also can be a really great teacher. And it was a huge realization for me that 50% of my life would be hard, probably more than 50%, I mean, if we're being honest. But I had this expectation that life should be good, that life should be perfect, and we should pursue that at all costs. And so I would, develop compulsive habits to keep life perfect, to keep life good. The interesting thing about that is when you try and do that, that's negative. Like, that is creating so much anxiety to keep life perfect. And so the ability to allow, pain in your body is a teacher. It's a signal. It's a signal that something's wrong, something needs to change. Difficulty in relationship, it's a signal that something needs to be addressed. And so allowing my feelings space to rise up, and when I acknowledge it in that way, through whatever practice, journaling, prayer, that it doesn't take up the space in my mind and start on a loop and just go and go and go and go and go. And so just practice of gratitude, the practice of allowing that feeling to come and to sit with it. And I would say that is probably, it's funny being someone who is in that world, you don't realize how funny you sound, but like, acknowledge that. What is it saying to you? But it's really true, allowing the feeling to come as a servant rather than as your master. And so allowing that feeling, allowing that space to come and go, what are you doing here? What do you have for me? And you are the one in charge, and the feelings don't get to tell the story. I can tell story after story after story of something that happened, and I spun a tale, and it went around and around and around. It took up tons of space and physical energy, mental energy, and it really was not at all reality. Mm-hmm. And yet there was something that triggered in me, and to allow it the space to teach us, but then to send it on its way when it's time. And I often find that the physical practice that can really help. That can really help. And for some people, running is the thing, right? For me, it's the pounding it out. For me, I found that the actual physical practice of it was just it was too repetitive. It almost served the wheel in my mind.
That's so true. It's so true. When I was getting diagnosed, my therapist actually said, don't go to the gym. And I'm like, what kind of therapist are you? And he's like, no, do quieter things. Cause I would be in hypomania, and then there'd be the music and and I'd leave and I'd be jacked in my anxiety. And so I love that you brought that up. I felt like, somebody else. Cause I get very stuck in the shoulds. I should be running, and, I should. And I love that, all of us are kind of saying feel, first of all, feel your feelings, but also that extra layer of judging your feelings, right? Don't judge your feelings, or find your thing. I love that. Abby, I would love to hear just from you, what reaction have you had or you seen that surprised you?
Okay. Well, no, I'm just thinking, because we already talked about I'm an American. And so I was raised in an evangelical church. And I now pastor in a mainline denomination. But just the way that the whole thing, I think in crisis, we find out which God we really believe in. You know, in crisis, we find out which God we really believe in. And one of the things that has just like broken my heart, just continues to, is that I was raised with a deep sense of love thy neighbor. You know, like my parents, I say that my parents were missional before Francis Chan wrote a book about it. I remember talking to my mom, I was in my early 20s, and I was like, Mom, there's this book, and it's about missional Christianity, and it means that you really live your blah, blah, blah. And she just was like, Abby, that just means being a Christian. Like, she was not playing with me. And like the church that I grew up in is being really safe and is being really positive. But like that there is this strand of Christianity that is extremely prevalent in the United States. And I think that we have exported that strand also. I think that you can trace that strand from the United States to other countries. But there is this strand of, sorry, my daughter is in the room. There's this strand of Christianity that tells us, like, we're in charge. You know, it's like God is in control and we're in control, and if we just do the right thing, then we will get this. You know, it's gonna be okay if we pray hard enough, if we leave our if we lead hard enough. It's like this idea that we are in control. And when we're so clearly not, you know, like this is not it. We are not in control. And then the other thing is, I've just been really disheartened just to see the reality of how much our church does not know how to deal with grief. You know, like we do not talk about grieving, and we don't do it, and we don't let people do it. There are just so few traditions, and you know, we don't have very few of us have a theology of grief. What does that mean? And where is God in that? And how do we, you know, practice gratitude and also admit that, like at the very beginning of this, my husband and I have never taken an anniversary trip, and we were gifted an opportunity to go to New York City for a week and be on Broadway and and watch some of the shows that we have always wanted to see, and you know, be alone together for the first time since our children were born, and that didn't happen. And that was really, really sad, you know. And yes, I will get to do that. And yes, you know, we got all our refunds or whatever. And also, that was heartbreaking. And is it more heartbreaking or less heartbreaking? Like, I have people whose mothers have died from COVID-19. Like, of course that grief is worse, but also God can hold all of our grief. Like, we don't have to be in a competition with each other.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I've been surprised by that. And then the other thing is, I think I've been surprised and disheartened to see just how many people are leading out of fear. Because I think that this is going to change the church forever. Like, I think that there are lots of churches that are going to not make it. Like, they're going to close down. They were closer than they thought budget-wise, and online giving is not adding up, and like the numbers aren't going to add up, and they're going to close. And there are lots of churches who are just making decisions really based out of fear. And so that's really hard.
love talking about I found it so freeing when someone said to me, I don't know who it was, but thank you, genius, that Shaley, this isn't the suffering Olympics. Like, if you're feeling sad about it or mad or this, you're feeling that. It doesn't, because I had this extra layer. Well, I always heard, well, people have it worse than you, or, do you know, because I very much recognize that I'm very privileged, right? Yes, I'm laid off, but is it really going to hurt us that bad? Probably not. We have a ton of food, that kind of thing. So I just, that was so freeing to me, right? That it's still sad. It was little, it might be little compared to this, compared to that, but don't do that, right? That's not going to help you get better about feeling sad or move through your sadness. And I think the second thing you said, you genius, was about the, about God being with you, and about, this whole just, he's in control. If it's not good news for everybody, then it's not good news. Right. So how do I'm just wrestling with that idea. It's just, if it's, because it hasn't, I haven't had, it's been like a couple degrees of separation from knowing someone that has it, and just seeing other people that aren't as privileged as me, just the guilt that I have about being sad, or I feel like for me personally, the hardest thing for me is I feel like I'm never doing the right thing, right? Like, so I can't settle into anything I'm doing, right? Like, whether it be trying to do self-care or art or this, or trying to, unless I'm accountable to someone else, like showing up here and being with you guys, I'm starting and stopping, and I never just feel like I can settle into anything I'm doing, because everything feels so uncertain. And at first I was just trying to shut that off, like, you're doing fine, even though.
Can I speak to that for a little bit?
You can.
Okay, so 80% of the hospitalizations of COVID-19 in my state are Black people. 80%. Which, like, they were looking at that because they thought it was high, but then even the people who were looking at it were like, oh my gosh, right? So this is hitting Indigenous people, like, horribly. Yeah. And that, I think, is another thing, right? Is that we want to talk about mental health like it could just be us, like self-care, right? Like, it's just me, it's me and God, I can control these things. But there are so many systems that are just like in it, that it's like, well, who has access to what is all part of that. And I think as white women, it's really important. And like, I feel very blessed. My husband and I, neither of us are going to lose our job. But like, what does that mean for us? And like, what are we willing to do? Because we don't want to just be so, it doesn't help anything to be so overwhelmed by the system and then to just have all of this white guilt and be like, oh, we're bad and we just can't be helped and blah, 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 blah. Like, first of all, that doesn't help anyone. And like, that is not what our sisters of color are asking us to do. But they are asking us to notice the discrepancies and to wonder, like, what might that be about? And how might we be able to think about that? And notice and wonder has no shame in it. But like, noticing, like, oh.
Okay, say that again. You need to say that again. Notice and wonder.
And wonder has no shame, and there's no should.
Wow.
You just notice, like, oh, like, I notice that the person, that I know whose mother died is Black. And I wonder what that might mean, about the statistics. And I notice that my husband and I didn't lose our jobs. And I wonder what we might do with our stimulus.
Right. Wow. Yeah. And I know, I'm glad you brought that up, because I know in our community, in the She Loves community, you know, justice is a huge part, and I can feel in our Dangerous Women tribe and just in our communities, just this collective grief for those around us, right? Because if you know, the whole idea, if we're not free, then other people aren't free. And just how do we, I love that, the notice and wonder, because that gets wrapped all up in guilt and shame too, right? Yeah, I feel like we need to have a whole nother conversation about that.
Yeah.
Like
And guilt and shame are just like that should in our head that we're talking about that is not helpful. And also it still continues to center us and our feelings.
Yes. Yes.
Totally useless, except for that it takes us totally out.
Yeah.
It's like a total lie from the pit.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And it's just interesting, like even where we're going with all this conversation, that we're carrying all this in here, right? And all this in here. And I think what we're trying to do here, besides talk about super awesome things, is also just offer a few things that we can do just to reconcile that, or just get to a baseline so that we can try and understand or wonder, like you said. And then I find that when I have self-compassion and self-care, then I can overflow in other ways, right? And I know that I've had this conversation with a few people that are absolutely like, self-care is selfish. And, you know, Jesus denied himself to the nth degree, and that's what we should do. And I've always struggled with love your neighbor as you love yourself, because my mental illness, like, I still don't know. I like myself. I think I'm all right. But the loving myself, so then how do I love my neighbor? And I've actually kind of switched a little bit, like love my neighbor as I love my friends, because I wouldn't talk to my friends how I talk to myself in here. Right?
But also love yourself as you love your friends.
Right? Right? And I think, look at you getting it all back. I think that all links to the self-care and self-compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Also, next time somebody says that to you, you need to tell them that every single time Jesus had a crowd of people around him demanding things from him, he left and took a nap. And you can check the Gospels. That is what it says.
You've given me something to say. Yeah. Yeah. And I think he understood self-care too, when he'd go off alone and pray. Do you know what I mean?
Jesus took so many naps.
Naps as resistance.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. There's actually, I follow on Instagram. It's called the Nap Ministry.
She's based in Atlanta. She graduated from my program 2 years before I did, and she's a genius.
There you go. There you go. Oh, that's amazing. Well, before we wrap up, I would just I know I'm all like wired in a good way, thinking about these things and just being with women who care, who have a heart for Jesus and for justice and just for each other. And I just would love to be able to bring this back. And I would love if Jena could just do a meditation or something that's on your heart with us to wrap this up, because I know that we've talked about some heavy things, and not that we want you to go away with your good vibes shirt, but just to be able to bring us back all together here so that we can go out and wonder some more and then come back to ourselves and to God. So Jena, if you wouldn't mind, I would love that.
Sure. Yeah, I just have to say, I love what you said about notice and wonder, and that can be exactly the same posture we can take with ourselves and with our feelings when they come up. This doesn't, like, I don't like this, or you know, something happens. Notice and wonder. We can even have that posture towards ourselves in the spirit of self-compassion. And yeah, I just feel like reading Psalm 23 over us as the meditation. Well, I wanted to just say briefly, one of the things that I've found that has helped me at the end of my day And even at the beginning of my day, sometimes I'll write out, oftentimes when you are meditating or you're breathing, there might be something that pops up and you know instantly, oh, this is here. This is that thing I'm worried about, or that thing I'm struggling with, or that there's a guilt or a shame, and it just like a balloon in water. I mean, it's just not going under. And especially when we are conscious, when we're consciously tapping into who we are and our very being, those things are going to pop up. And so, you know, Shaley, you talked about practice, and I think one of the practices that I'll do is I'll write it down. The thing I want to let go of, or the thing I need help with. You know, acknowledging I need help with this. This hurts, or you know, the thing I'm grateful for, the thing I'm proud of myself for, and the thing I need to forgive myself for. And so holding, you know, allowing that space to even just think about those things and then get them out. I thought about how I would do a meditation with those things, but maybe that's a practice that can be done in your own space. But I'm going to read Psalm 23 over us. Just a quick note. I learned this the other day, and it's blowing my mind. That sheep that are in green meadows eat nonstop. So sheep that lay down in a green meadow are full. And sheep very rarely get full. They will eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. So a sheep that lies down in a green pasture is full and completely satisfied. So when I read this, that is the picture of the sheep in Psalm 23. Completely satisfied. God, our shepherd, we don't need a thing. You have bedded us down in lush meadows. You find us quiet pools to drink from. True to your word, you let us catch our breath, and you send us in the right direction. Even when our way goes through Death Valley, we're not afraid. When you walk at our side, your trusty shepherd's crook makes us feel secure. You serve us a 6-course dinner right in front of our enemies, all our enemies. And you revive our drooping heads. Our cups brim with blessing. Your beauty and love chase after us every single day of our lives. And we will be home in the house of God forever. A little bit of a paraphrase on Psalm 23, but it's a gooder.
I love that. Every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Even the days that are exactly the same right now, right? Every single day. I'm going to carry that and so many of your guys' words. I'm so lucky that I get to download this because I could listen to it over and over tonight. Thank you for showing up as your full selves and just being honest and open. We know that frees others to do the same. And I'm so grateful for your yes. And I'm so grateful to call you friends. And so thank you so, so much. I adore you guys.
Thanks.
Total pleasure. Thank you for providing this space.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you, Abby.
You too.
That's awesome.